So welcome everyone to actually our last virtual panel of 2021. I keep forgetting what year it is. So welcome everyone. Thank you to our awesome panel for joining us today to talk about influencer marketing. We're really going to dive in and uncover, how agencies and brands are developing strategic programs around influencer marketing and discuss, things around measurement, successful ways to work with influencers. And in a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Keith Bendis, who is the VP of Vice President of Brand Strategy at Linqia. And for our attendees and everyone, also remember we have our Presidio in the party in the Presidio November 4th coming up. So be on the lookout for that information. And Keith, I turn it over to you in the panel. Take it away.
Thank you, Bessie, and welcome everyone. We've got a really strong panel today, and we want to cover as much as we can. So we'll dive into the juicy stuff pretty quickly. So like Bessie said, my name is Keith Bendis. I lead brand strategy here at Linqia. Linqia is an influencer partner, one of the largest in the world, working with major brands on developing influencer strategies. We have really diverse viewpoints here on the call. So we have Drew McGowan. Do you want to give a little wave, Drew? So Drew spent a lot of time in the CPG world, working at Clorox, then working at Cliff Bar between communications and influencer marketing, and now runs his own consultancy. So Drew brings a deep level of CPG expertise. Jen Manager, Jen, do you want to wave? So Jen has been at Wells, I think you're coming up on 10 years now. So financial maven, very detailed in the financial industry, which is a huge segment right now in influencer marketing. So she'll have a very different mindset and different go-to-market than Drew has in CPG. And then LeBrandon, you want to give a wave, LeBrandon? So LeBrandon Dates is a fantastic influencer himself and content creator, has worked with many leading brands. I know he's worked on many Linqia programs in his history, and even has helped with thought leadership on things like diversity and inclusion. We've had him on panels. So just a very expert leader in the space. So great group of people with different mindsets. So I'm going to jump in. Let's start with some questions. Whenever you guys answer a question on the panel, if you want to add a little color to like what your role is or what your focus area is, that would be great. But let's start with just the massive growth in this industry over the last 18 months, because we saw it in e-commerce, but a little more obvious. There's a pandemic, you can't go into store, everyone's buying online, but we saw almost an equal explosion in influencer marketing. So Drew, I know especially on CPG, the explosion happened. Any thoughts on why over this last 18 months has this thing just skyrocketed?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this. I think, in my estimation, is really looking at, especially from a packaged goods perspective. I think you have to think back, and it seems like a while ago, but last, March and April, a lot of marketing, brands that did marketing shut things off. They turned off marketing. Everybody didn't know really where to put their money. Advertising stopped. But at least in my experience, influencer then stepped in, and working with content creators. And we revved that up at Cliff Bar in particular, where we turned virtually all other marketing off, because it was a way that we could talk in a very real way, working with influencers and content creators, for them to talk to their audience about how to use our products and how they were kind of coping with being at home. And it was a very authentic and real way, where as the brand, we didn't really feel comfortable talking about us ourselves. And then the other thing that happened too, last summer, and at least for Cliff Bar, we did it throughout the entire year. We were part of the boycott with Facebook and Instagram. And same thing, we weren't putting any money into those platforms. However, we ramped up our partnerships with influencers and really felt like we didn't want to turn off our work with them, because we thought of them as small business owners, and we didn't want to take any dollars away from them. And I think what happened, at least for us and a lot of the other brands that I follow, is that all happened, and kind of, the old saying, 21 days to create a habit, is those habits started forming, and we saw some positive results. And you realize working with influencers and content creators is both very efficient, but effective at the same time. And then there was kind of like, no, why should we go back to the way we were doing things? And I think that's led into 2021 with in particular, newer platforms, at least for brands like TikTok, and then leaning into other places where maybe brands weren't playing as much, like Pinterest or Twitch, because those are things that brands needed to try out because they weren't working with Instagram and Facebook at the time. So I think all that rolled up has led to lots of brands finally being smart and making sure that influencer marketing is part of the marketing mix.
Yeah. Brandon, as an influencer, did you feel the space heating up? Did you see more brands entering? Did you see more activity?
Absolutely. And just to complement what Drew said, I think once brands started to experiment with influencer marketing more, one of the things that they found was a value add is this concept of trust. Capturing and earning consumer trust is so hard right now. And, I think of influencer marketing as it is the new word of mouth. And so just having influencers be able to authentically share their experiences with brands, I think it's a great way to have that social proof and to build trust. And I certainly saw an increase in brands reaching out to partner with me.
Yeah. And then Jen, so financial services, there was a great article, I think I posted it a few weeks ago, on just how much that segment's growing in influencer, which isn't the obvious segment you think when you think influencer. Like, why is that? Why is financial services doubling down in this space?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. I think the big one for financial services is the maturity of the tools that are coming to be available. With the regulatory environment, with the complications, disclosures, and other requirements that go with any of our advertising across, FinServ, we can't be always the first one to the opportunity, right? We have to kind of wait until that there's tools and opportunities for management to come about. And so I feel like now we're starting to see that level of maturity across the industry. There's viable metrics. The platforms are really starting to dig into the tools and enabling the brands to really take advantage of what influencers are going to do and also be able to measure that. I think the other piece of the puzzle is that now that we've kind of been able to work with and develop those relationships in the influencer space and have tested it along the way, like very incremental, like let's do a little over here and do a little over there, that has enabled us to get comfortable with it. And so I think those two pieces of the puzzle, the maturity of the space and the test and learn, has really enabled us to figure out, like, what are our best practices? What types of influencers do we want to work with? What types of products, should we have influencers talk about, right? They're probably, an influencer isn't going to sell an investment portfolio, but they probably can sell a credit card. So how does that play in that suite of product space?
Yeah. And so people listening have context. Do you want to give a little bit on what your role is? Because I know your remit is broader than influencer, and then where you look at influencer in that remit. Yeah,
sure. So I lead, so part of the social media marketing team at Wells Fargo, I lead the publishing capabilities and governance team. And so basically anything that you see that goes out across any of the Wells Fargo social channels, now also including influencer, comes through my team. So we manage all of it. So as you can imagine, all the compliance requirements, risk mitigation, regulatory requirements, we're looking at all of that across all of the spaces. And then algorithms and fair lending requirements. There's a whole host of things we have to take into consideration when we bring things like this to market. And so, one of the big kind of like safety applications that we look for is really the maturity of our partners. And so we're starting to see that happen more and more, and the tools are becoming more robust, which makes us much more comfortable, so that now influencer marketing can be equated to an ad. So we might have an ad unit, advertising a specific product or service, or awareness around the company and the reputation, and then influencer is used as an accompaniment to kind of extend that audience in a much more authentic and like one-to-one way.
Yeah, that's so a soundbite, and Drew, I'm interested to your thought. A soundbite that's been resonating in the industry is, a percentage maybe it's 20-30% of the value of influencer comes from the organic post of the influencer, but there's massive percentage of unlock in things like what Jen's saying is paid media and other uses and the utility of the content. Like, how are you treating the full value of influencer? How do you unlock that full value?
Of course, perfect timing. I locked up there. So I think I heard most of your question. Was it about, just how to leverage working with influencers across marketing and
basically beyond the organic, how are you tapping the full value of influencers?
Yeah, and I think that's really the unlock, to be honest. One of the other parts of my professional career is I sit on the board of the Influencer Marketing Association as well. And so I'm continually trying to figure out ways to leverage influencers in smart ways to make sure that we're educating. Hey, Keith, why don't you come back to me? I'm going to see if I can fix something.
Perfect. Okay. Perfect. And I did forget to mention that we'll come back to the Influencer Marketing Association too, because I know Drew is heavily involved in that on the board. But LeBrandon, this is a really hot topic. So brands, as Jen mentioned, are taking influencers, working with influencers, they're creating content, and that content is being used in a much broader scope than just the organic channel. So paid media, owned and operated, some are using it in store marketing. How do you feel about that as an influencer? Is that good, or is that overstepping the boundaries of brands?
Oh, I think that's great. And I think, I love to work with the brand that sees beyond just the organic post. What's the old adage of you need to see something, 3 or 4 times before you take action. So I think it's great that brands are asking to whitelist content so that they can put some dollars behind it. I love that, a lot of fashion brands, as you mentioned, they're taking that content, blowing it up and putting it in store. So as many times as you can sort of reinforce this content to the consumer, I think the better it is. And I'm always open to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that seems to be one of the biggest trends in the industry. Jen, I assume on the media side, are you starting to look at how influencer content performs from a media standpoint to be more apples to apples in the broader marketing tactics?
Yeah, that's one of the issues that we've had with influencer marketing is really understanding the value, right? Because so much of it sort of through this whole progression has been organic, and we're at the mercy of the platform algorithms and, how much that influencer engages on their own content and engages with their audience. And, we see that, the shift from, I want like a celebrity who I wouldn't even call an influencer today, to someone who's more of like a micro or a nano influencer where they're very, very niche on a specific topic. Those have become more valuable because that is going to get a little bit more, they're going to take advantage of the opportunity of the engagement with their audience, right? And that might be something we can't quantify from a reach perspective, like impression delivery or something. But the value that we're seeing is really from the positive sentiment, the positive engagement around the brand and the product. You take that as one segment of influencer initiatives or engagement or campaigns, and then you couple that with, wow, we're looking at across all of these different influencers, maybe of 10 or 15, they've all posted organic content. And now we have the ability to say, wow, this one's doing really good. We're going to pull that in and amplify it. And so that's where we're now at. And I think that's going to be a complete game changer because the brands now have the tools to actually amplify, like boost, we call it like a boost model, that influencer content to a specific audience based upon how they're performing in the organic space.
Yeah. And Drew, did you want to build? I know you were talking about the IMA.
Besides the content creation part, which is obviously extremely valuable, is really leveraging, I've had good luck working with influencers as partners in, testing out messages before we went out as a larger paid campaign to see what they thought of it and actually ask them to chime in and help develop it with us. We've had them come to events when we used to do events in person, but also host virtual events for us, as a much bigger draw than, honestly having somebody from the brand side, and reaching out to new consumers. We've used them for focus groups. So these are all kind of like behind the scenes, a lot of this stuff that is really valuable because, if, once upon a time you could have an editor from the New York Times give you input, for instance, on your product, people would jump at that. Why not leverage a content creator who probably has a larger audience, honestly, and a more targeted audience than that editor from the New York Times, and work with them in a partnership? And I think it's thinking through those other buckets that you can do that are really, really change the relationship. And that I think the real key in this is educating senior leadership, who have the budgets, and really educating them on the value that working with influencers can bring to your organization and your overall marketing mix as true partners. I think that's where, everything really changes.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing influencer content used on product detail pages, on e-commerce sites, in CTV ads because they're being post-produced. To your point, attending events. Like when you work with an influencer, there's this massive ecosystem that you could tap within them, and it's unlocking that ecosystem. We also have an awesome question in the chat from Jesse. So, what is the value in influencer in paid post if it's being targeted audiences that might not know the influencer? So, I'll give you a little perspective from mine, and then Brandon, I'm curious to hear from your perspective. So when we do media, and we do a lot of media with influencer content, there's different ways to do it. When we whitelist, so LeBrandon, let's say you're on a program, we're whitelisting through you, a big value is we do have access to your audience and lookalikes off of your audience. And so we can actually go target a broader group, understanding who is following you and who likes you. A second option is you just do more mass targeting. We're not using your audience at all. We're just using what the brand might do for their normal targeting mechanisms or whatever we can do on Facebook platform. And then the third is this huge segment of first and third party data. We've spent a lot of time and money as a company on our side, making sure that we can onboard first party data from brands to either suppress those lists or target those lists. Or we have third-party data sets. So if someone's trying to target beauty shoppers at Walgreens, let's literally take a third-party segment that is beauty shoppers at Walgreens and bring your content to them. So we have a lot of options in doing that. But most of the time when we're doing it, it's from LeBrandon, your handle, right? Because it's being done through you. So I want to get your thoughts on that whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm assuming that when, a brand reaches out to say, hey, your content's performing really well, we want to whitelist it. It's because, as Jennifer's mentioned, across all the influencers they're working with, this is what is performing and engaging the most. And so I almost see it as a opportunity for the brand to do some additional A/B testing, right? Maybe they've got some, in-house produced content that they're running ads for, and now they're boosting, content through my channel. It allows them to see, what is actually performing the best. And it can create some really great learnings for the brand. And then selfishly, as an influencer, I love it when you want to whitelist my content, because that means that my brand is going to get in front of a lot of more people, and that hopefully expands my audience.
Yeah, that's great. And in this process, so another fantastic question in the chat was, in the traditional funnel, where does influencer sit? We've spoken a lot about this as a marketing community. So I know technically the answer depends. So why don't we take the approach of why is it one versus the other? Jen, do you want to start with how you think about upper, mid, lower funnel when you do influencer programs?
Yeah. So basically we would look at it based on the type of campaign we're trying to initiate, right? It really is going to come back to the KPIs of that campaign. So if we're looking to advertise a product or service and we're leveraging influencers to kind of get sort of like more of a one-to-one experience out in the marketplace, it might be that there's a call to action. Each of the influencers have a specific link, so we have the ability to track back that we would give to them, so we can look at conversion metrics on the back end. If it's an awareness campaign where we're just trying to get the word out about things that we're doing, as a company, whether, different initiatives, that's going to be, just general reach. So from an influencer perspective, the way we look at it, we look at it as a tactic that we would leverage to get our message out, whether that's a lower funnel, call to action, or it's an upper funnel awareness driver. And the influencer content and the influencers are going to align to what audience we're trying to reach, what content we're trying to communicate, product or service we're trying to offer. And so the suite of services in terms of finding the influencer and working with them becomes really that important piece of the puzzle to enabling that tactic to be successful.
Yep. And you have a longer purchase journey and customer journey than someone like, Drew might in his days in CPG, where it's an easier
Right.
conversion. Like Drew, when it is lower funnel, let's say you are trying to drive sales, the company's putting pressure to move products. How do you activate influencers differently in that case?
And I mean, that's the reality, even, in anything you're doing that's an awareness builder, you're still trying to prove out in some way the ROI to show that it is selling product, at least, in the longer game. But I think what works really well for us is, especially with micro influencers or even ambassadors, is ratings and reviews. I think is a really great way to convert people. As we all know, you go online and you're buying anything, you look to see what were the latest reviews. And if there's not a recent review, or the most recent reviews are 2 stars, you're probably less likely to click buy. So we worked a lot, especially, during the pandemic, with micro influencers, really small influencers, to make sure that, that we were keeping ratings and reviews moving forward continually. And that was a proof point that we were able to show from a business standpoint that was starting to move product. And so I think there's things like that. We've tried, I think it depends on the products, right? And the cost, but promo codes and coupons and free shipping and all that kind of stuff can work. I think if it's the right brand, it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah. And LeBrandon, do you tweak how you create content, or what format, video, static, in feed, store? Like if the goal of the brand ultimately is to try to drive people more down funnel to buy?
Absolutely. I think when we're starting to, get into looking at those conversion metrics as success for a campaign, oftentimes I find myself needing to do more video, needing to do more things that allow me to post stories that are, allow people to swipe up and have easy access to going to a landing page where they can, collect information or directly buy something. So I think, when we're talking conversion, a lot more video content, or there's an increase in frequency of the number of organic posts that I would do for that campaign.
Yeah. And honestly, this is, to Scott's original question, it is full funnel. And that's why it was such a rare thing. And that's why it's growing so much. You used to, if you were an upper funnel marketer, it was kind of your lofty brand story. And if you were lower funnel, it was buy 2, get 1 free, 50 cents off. This is a tactic where it is kind of both in a beautiful setting. I worked at Unilever for a long time. Dove, I loved the Dove brand, Dove Men. We used to say, if there's a display ad on ESPN.com and you click it and you're taken to like Walmart's product detail page of Dove Men, as a consumer, I'm like, what in the hell just happened? But if I'm watching a story of a guy I follow and he says, hey, my morning routine is to use this face wash with this moisturizer, with this cleanser, swipe up, I'll drop it in your cart. Let me know what you think about it. And I do swipe up, it makes total sense. And so one of the biggest trends we're seeing is carting. The idea that when you do swipe up or you do click, especially in the ad side of things, we cart those products and we place them directly in your cart. So you're 1 click away from checking out as a consumer. And especially, Drew, for the CPG side, where it is lower basket value, you do want to bundle. Everyone's trying to get a regimen of products, whether it's beauty or food recipes or whatever. That brings people down funnel in a really nice way. But LeBrandon, we've talked about this. I never want your job to be pushing product. I want your job to tell a really good, authentic story. To Jen's point, I can put it in a media setting and add a call to action to make the swipe up. But like, your job is to get great content that influences people's perceptions. Scott added one more. I like that we're doing this real time. Is swipe up the new and much better click? LeBrandon, for organic, I'd assume you say yes. Jen and Drew, for media, I assume you'd say everything's clickable in a media setting. But are you finding, Jen or Drew, do you find any data on like what type of content is better at an action? Is it video? Is it story based? Is it carousels? Like, are there any trends that you're seeing on social?
Yeah, I mean, I think to LeBrandon's point, I think depends on the medium, right, and the platform you're using. But certainly with Instagram, as we all know, anything that's like a few clicks away, you lose virtually everybody. So getting a static story, which may live over a longer period of time, is great. And that's a lot of what, I think brands were pushing for originally. But to get people to go to your bio and find a link, we all know that's not happening. So the swipe up, again, like Keith, to your point, if it's told in a really authentic, doesn't feel salesy way, like, a couple of the clients I'm working with now, I'm pushing the content creators to really like stop selling the product and just be real. Like the whole pose with the product, it's just, I know that's what you think we want as a brand. And I'm sure there are lots of brand marketers who are like, that's exactly what we want. But you also need to put yourself in the consumer's shoes. And that's not what any of us want to see on Instagram or wherever, we're consuming this content. So I think it's just swipe up makes a lot of sense, especially again, if it's told in a really relevant way that makes you want to swipe up. You're not doing it by accident.
Yeah. And then a question from Jesse, I think Jen, you could chime in here, is I think the nature of the question is really, what is success when an influencer posts an organic? Because a lot of the comments may be not specifically like, I love Wells Fargo and I want to go buy this. It could be, love this photo, love your kids, like, is that good? How are you judging like the sentiment and the performance of the organic side?
Well, we're definitely looking at the positivity. Obviously our brand has been challenged over the last 4 or 5 years. So we're still kind of building back that reputation, trying to, show our customers and show the public that, we've made changes to be a better bank. And so a lot of the conversations that we're looking at and the metrics of success, if you will, are really around sentimentality. Are we putting things out there that people are grasping on and having a positive experience around? And so a lot of our influencer opportunities are, just, not like product placement, right? It's tell the story. This is why I'm involved. Like, this is why we're working with this person. And so we're seeing a lot of that drawn out to kind of talk like ancillarily, like we're adjacent to the story, not like, let me tell you how great this iPhone is, like it's, I'm working with this brand because of XYZ of my values. But I think the thing is, from a pure measurement perspective, I think we're just starting to get there. And really the tools now, only in the last maybe 4 to 6 months, have really been mature enough for us to now equate back and forth like, okay, this, influencer A's post, we got 500 comments and 75% of those were positive and we reached 100,000 people, versus this influencer B, they only had 200 comments and they were all negative. Like, what's the difference? Like, we're in that mix now. I think it's been proven that brands should use influencers. Now it's a question of how, when, and what's successful. And we're at the cusp of that, I feel.
Yeah. And there's a level of intentionality where it's not reactive, it's proactive. And LeBrandon, you probably see this in briefs that we send sometimes, like, and Drew, we talked about this, like building an actual content matrix before you do anything, before you find talent, before you go live. Because a lot of it is, what are the main themes that we could say as a brand? And let's look at the performance of those themes. So it's not necessarily LeBrandon versus John. If LeBrandon's brief was, hey, you're going to do 3 posts, we want you to cover 3 kind of different topics. It's more about when they all go live, which are the topics that are getting positive sentiment, or which are the audience segments that are reacting in a beneficial way, or which type of content is driving better click versus things that are driving better commentary. So, but that can't be reactive. That can't be, we've launched the program, let's try to find themes. That has to be, we've thought about this up front. We've defined different messaging structures and type of audiences. And by the time, LeBrandon, you get involved, you now know, I need to cover these different themes somehow, and they're going to try to look at how they perform as themes.
Exactly. And I will say some of that onus is on the content creator. I know when I'm doing sponsored content versus just organic content, there are certain pivots that I need to make sure that, of course, I'm part of the story, but if I'm promoting a service or a product, that really needs to be the star. And that's what I really want my followers talking about in the comments versus, the fact that they love my outfit or, your skin looks amazing today. If that's what I'm seeing in the comments, then what that says to me is I haven't really done an awesome job of understanding the brief and really, telling the story in a compelling way to pull focus where it needs to go.
What differentiates, to that point, a good brief from a brand brief? You're gonna have a lot of brand marketers watching this. So some of it is like, how tight of a box do you want to be created for you in that brief?
Right. Well, I absolutely love understanding, what are the key messages? What is success? What does success look like at the end of the day? Without, necessarily being told, here is the story that we need you to write. To me, some of the most effective briefs, they give you your key message points. They give you your don'ts, right? Here are the things we absolutely don't want to see in the post. But then from there, they give you the freedom to speak in your own voice and to tell a story that's authentic to you without trying to over prescribe what story you're going to put out there and what story you're going to tell. That's what's worked best for me. Whenever I feel like my post is already done for me, when I get the brief, that never tends to perform well.
Yeah. And do you find, for Drew, we could start with you, when you find influencers, it takes time, right, for them to learn the brand, to have a relationship. Are you reusing those influencers over and over again, or is your priority more to get fresh faces on each campaign?
Both. I think that's the most successful model. I would love to, I think good campaigns are a mix of, content creators that are true ambassadors that actually love the brand. In the best case scenario, it's that you found each other in some way and that this is real. It isn't just, oh, I'd never heard of you before, but sure, I'll take a little money to talk about it. There's plenty of those, but if you can find, the right partner, like I have a great example of one of the clients I'm working with right now. It's a really small startup food company, and they make making ice cream and gelato really easy at home. It's not something people are necessarily like seeking out, but I've been able to partner with a couple of content creators, micro influencers, and I actually sat down with them and brought them through not just like the brief for the post, but the creative brief for like what we're trying to do as a company. And so that she understood it. And I was like, what do you think we should do? What would you like to do? How do you think you could move this? And she came back to us with great ideas that I wouldn't have ever come up with. And I think she loved it too, because she was able to actually make some money, but also like get creative and do something fun. And it's also helping grow her fans and her followers that, somebody else down the road is going to pay her more money, but we're going to continue to work with her in that way. So I think it's having that good mix of, you want to reach new audiences and new people, but when you find some good partners, that's what they are. They become partners and they're trusted. You build trust in each other. And then, as soon as events kind of get back in, those are the people we want coming to events and trade shows and conferences, hosting things and really being a brand ambassador for us.
Yeah. Sometimes I know creator is becoming a new term because almost influencer has this weird connotation, but that makes me so mad because I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of brand marketers in my life. Influencers are as good, if not better, brand marketers than most of the people I've worked with. Like they are incredibly intelligent brand marketers themselves because they are the brand. Like there's more riding on everything they do for their own profile than most brands. Jen, you're in a situation though where there is a lot at stake, right? There's compliance laws. There's a lot of things you have to be aware of from FTC disclosures and requirements. Like, how do you go about choosing and like what makes a good influencer when you're doing the vetting process?
Well, we actually work with a whole lot of agencies to help us. find the influencer. We don't work directly with influencers. We work through a third party. And so a lot of that kind of legwork, if you will, finding the right ones, is done by the agency. We will provide the brief of like, this is what the objective of the campaign is, this is what the KPIs are, this is what we're looking for. And then really it's on the agency to go and find those potential influencers and then bring them to us for us to kind of like continue to vet. We do look at their profiles, right, on all of their social channels, if there's anything, you know, out of the ordinary. I mean, it was interesting, just like a week ago, someone sent me a list, and one of the people in the group that they had picked was a Amex ambassador. And I was like, well, we can't have that person, you know? So we're looking at, you know, now that we're in the mix and kind of looking at that, like, I would say the second or third level vetting, the influencers that we're seeing that are being kind of bubbled up from our agency partners, they are influencers who are working with a host of other products and brands. And so it's interesting to me because I feel like there's going to get to a place where is everyone an influencer, right? Because somebody's always going to have some niche piece of the puzzle. But it's also interesting to like make sure that like, okay, well, you're going to be an influencer for Wells Fargo. Have you ever been an influencer for a financial company? Which would be question one. Question two is, what other influencer products have you been affiliated with? Is our brand okay with those other products? So we're starting to get into this place where, you know, I would almost call it a little like we're leveraging our user-generated content, you know, vetting criteria to apply to influencer. So do they meet our brand standards? You know, what is their affiliation to other things, right? Are they talking positively about animals, you know, the environment? So there's all these other pieces that now have to get weighed in the mix based upon someone's public persona on a social media channel.
Yeah. And we get a lot of questions of how do the agencies and platforms do that for you? So just to give people we won't go deep, very brief under the hood. A lot of it is one, demographic data. So what are just the demographics of the influencer? Two is audience data. So who is following that influencer and what's the demographic profile of the audience? Three is what Drew was saying is what are they talking about before? Do they have brand love? Are they talking about other things? So we're literally looking at all of the posts that they have and saying, what are they speaking about? What's in the imagery? And then four is you're accumulating data. LeBrandon knows this. We send surveys all the time to say, how old are your kids? Do you use, you know, credit cards, or what credit cards do you use? And you're compiling that data and the database is building and building. So LeBrandon, when you signed up for our platform, we probably had a certain amount of information, and that information grows and grows and grows over time. And so you're getting more and more detail. So when people say, I have to work with kids, but they have to be the age of 2 and 12, we're looking at all the self-reported data. We're looking at the survey-based data. We're looking if there's anything in their imagery. And so it is a pretty complex process. But then Jen, to your point, there is also the manual. These people have passed the whole technical review. Now we have to make sure with eyes that there's nothing compromising, or that they are the right person for the job. And LeBrandon, when you do this, so when you're partnering with a brand on the other side, I'm interested to hear one trend we saw last year. I think you and I talked about this once, was influencers pushing back on what are brands doing about certain causes and certain situations. Black Lives Matter was a big one. The election was a big one. And it was a very interesting kind of switch of power where usually influencers are questioning the brands are questioning the influencers. Influencers like, I'm not going to work with them unless they have a stance or they're doing something in this regard. Do you think about that when brands reach out to you?
Absolutely. I've got two big buckets, three, but two important ones. Number one is believability. Do I use the product? Would I use the product or service? Does it check out? You know, because if it doesn't check out, it's not going to work. And then the second thing I look at is absolutely the brand values. Do they value the same things that I value? Do they support the same things that I support? Again, am I willing to tie my brand to this brand? Just like, are they willing to tie theirs to me? I'm always thinking about that as I'm, deciding whether or not I want to move forward with the brand.
Yeah. And do you, Drew, so we are seeing engagement rates spike on social impact programs or cause-based programs. Are you always looking at those angles, or is that, unless it's natural, like it's not an angle?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the way to think about it, how my career has evolved is I started out in public relations, and I was always, well, first jobs were in government and helping start up a nonprofit. So I always had that kind of background. And then when I went into the for-profit world and the agency world, and then in-house, I was always looking for how are we going to tell a story. And this was, even before places like Instagram and Facebook. This was trying to get stories written in a newspaper or a magazine or online. And you have to realize that having a cause that you're backing in a real way, it has to be fundamental, it has to be authentic. We've all heard the term, thankfully we don't hear this that much anymore, greenwashing, things like that. I think brands have finally gotten smart about that. But if you do something that's really real, that's tied to your product, people like that. And I think in particular during the pandemic, what I saw for both brands I worked on, but also other brands, is the combination of cause, again, that's authentic, that's real, and product or service together is where you saw the most engagement. So we tried different things where it was product based and we'd have, X amount of engagement. And then we said all about cause and we'd have X amount of engagement. But if you tied them together, we found that that was the most engagement we saw. And those were like the record-setting posts that we'd have, both from internal our own channels, but then also working with influencers. So a great example is during the pandemic at Cliff Bar, we were at different stages trying to get food into the hands of healthcare workers. And then over the summer in 2020, into the hands of families and kids, because kids weren't going to school. And a lot of kids get their only good meal of the day at school. And so we worked with a ton of different influencers, both micro and macro, and some celebrities that I've known throughout my career. And I reached out to them and said, look, I can't pay you any money, but I want to give you 10,000 bars to give to an organization that you care about that helps families. And they were like, done. Where do I sign up? And they wound up talking about it multiple times, very real, even going to the organization when the bars were delivered. And that's something, if we had paid for it, would have felt gross, first of all, but would have also just not felt real. This was something we just said, we're giving you the bars, talk about it however you want. And it was just amazing what we got out of it. And those were the spikes that we saw. So I'd really, aggressively try to get any brands out there to pair whatever you're selling with the cause that's relevant, that's authentic, that's something you really care about as a company or a brand. Put it together and talk about it.
Yeah. Do you, LeBrandon, if you have two outreaches from brands, do you have a bias to if one is more social impact or cause based?
Certainly. Again, if the brand value is in alignment with things that I'm really passionate about, I'm going to lean toward working with them more than I would a brand that might potentially pay me more. Because I certainly approach influencing and content creation from a bit of a different lens. As a micro influencer, this isn't my bread and butter, right? This is something I enjoy. This is something I do on the side. And so if I'm going to do the work, I really need to believe in what I'm doing. Otherwise, it just makes no sense for me to press ahead. Yep.
Yeah. And Jen, you made an interesting comment. You said, now we're entering the phase where it's not about should we do influencer, it's how should we do it. When you think about kind of I feel like all of us in the industry know this is such a successful thing. Like, wait, we can get content and use it everywhere else and in paid, and it does better in paid. How are you planning on, for all the marketers out there who are like, I need to get more resourcing for my company and I need to invest bigger? How are you trying to show that? How are you packaging it up to the organization?
Well, it's really coming down to metrics. And so, where we started with was like sentiment and positivity as it related to reputation. Obviously, one of our big goals over the last few years is building back our reputation. And so that's been a huge piece of the puzzle. So that was a key indicator of success over the past couple of years. Now that we have more tools at our disposal that we can actually look at the metrics, now we have the ability to really say what's working better. Is this an influencer message that's driving the goals, or is it our actual ad unit? And I think it's going to be really interesting to understand what that means for the brand, right? Is it, it might be different from different products and services. I can't imagine that WIM would, like our wealth investment management side of our business is going to be, I look at that as maybe internal influencers, and how do we leverage, people who talk on CNBC and, are setting that economic outlook, like how do we convert them into an influencer versus we want to talk about like what we're doing for small businesses, or we're launching a new credit card. That's going to be a different suite. But they all have to kind of be able to be managed from the same place as it relates to success. And so those metrics of reach, engagement, positivity, and ultimately a call to action are really going to be our baseline of how we're going to evaluate and how we leverage influencers as a tactic, depending upon the needs of the campaign. And I don't think that we're there yet, right? Like we're sort of like starting to understand what those pieces mean. We're starting to identify what the pieces should be. I always think of it, anytime there's something new, it's always a shiny new toy and everyone wants to try it, which is great because we've got a lot of learnings across different business lines internally around how influencers are either driving positively or not. And so we're starting to build out that I would call center of excellence on best practices and how we think about how we do influencers and what are the best practices, what is the governance around it. So we're at a place where now it's been proven as a method to drive either product sales, service opportunities, and positive reputational impact. Now, how do we use it in the best way to harness that, to optimize it for success?
Yeah. We talk a lot about the maturity curve that brands have gone on over the past couple of years. And again, it depends how big you are as a brand, but for large enterprise brands, some of that maturity curve is like they started with free product and a barter relationship, and then they went to like an affiliate type of relationship, and then they went to more of a paid relationship where the influencer posts. Then they went to a media relationship where they post and they use the content. And now we're going to like a whole ecosystem where it's funneling all. And a lot of brands, frankly, now they do always on, where there's media running using the influencer content all of the time. And then they pulse organic pulses when they see the frequency and the fatigue start kicking in on the media content. And so it is amazing, even the last 2 years, to see that journey. One thing I did want to ask, Jen, is what are the social platforms saying? Like when you meet with the Facebooks and the TikToks and the Instagram, what are they saying about influencer?
Well, now they're actually realizing that there's, for lack of a better word, a lot of money here. And so they're putting a lot more energy and support and resources into building out those tools. So, Twitter has always, over the last couple of years, you could whitelist content. They had a very seamless integration, super easy to use. We've been doing whitelist content with partners and influencers for the past couple of years on Twitter, and it was fine. Now that, Facebook has kind of, brought this branded content capability to the table, it's really going to be a game changer for us in terms of being able to understand success and then also have the influencer content live in parallel with the ad content. So it's not going to be, we have to get access to that person's account to try to get an agency. And that's such a pain and really a barrier to entry and tons of extra risk that we don't want to take on. And so they've really made this seamless in order for brands to be able to take, LeBrandon's content and be like, we're going to put 10 grand against that. And boom, I can see all the metrics in the tool, just like I would any of my content that I'm promoting for anything else. So I think that it really is a game changer for us. And we're trying to do our best internally to educate all of our partners on like, wait, we have a tool, like we can do this now. We've got the tools to make it happen. So I think that, that's just going to open up so many doors. And in addition, one of the other pieces of the puzzle that I think that Facebook has really kind of, pushed the envelope on is giving brands the ability to find their own influencers. And that's a place where we have not played at all. And as I said earlier, we've really leveraged the agency model to kind of work with us to find the right people. Well, now we'll be able to also validate that within our own tools. So really the reins are being given back to the brands to really own this. So it's going to be interesting to see how, we're always going to have an agency involved, because we're never going to be able to do a direct to influencer relationship, just the nature of our business, the indemnity clauses, etc. It's just too much of a heavy lift. So there's always going to be an agency play in there, but it's going to be interesting to see for smaller brands that don't have those types of heavy lifts, how they can use these tools in a self-serve way. So really, what is the opportunity from an influencer perspective to go direct to brands versus through the agency model?
Yeah, there's that great image of the creator funds. And obviously Facebook at the $1 billion level is leading it right now, but I think they said TikTok might even go higher, but every single one has a fund now. Pinterest launches idea pins because they want to get more direct with influencer relationships. TikTok is launching story type of content. I mean, everyone it's like the battle for influencers, which is a good tie into, there's another question, Drew, for you. It says, you mentioned going off of Facebook and IG with the boycott. Let's talk about some of those other platforms, the TikToks, the Pinterest, the YouTubes, the world.
Yeah, I think, so what I would say is it depends on what your brand goals are, what your brand is, who you're trying to reach. Is, you need to really start there. It's the same as if you're doing a media buy. There's better places to buy media and it would be the same, for working with content creators and working with platforms. And also it's, what is the message then they're delivering on that platform? Because you could have the right platform, but the wrong influencer delivering the wrong message, and then it doesn't matter. So, but I've tried out over the last year and a half, obviously TikTok, but then places that I hadn't really been doing too much before: Pinterest, Twitch, Snap. We don't really think of it in this way, but podcasts in general, and actually working with influencers to actually be on podcasts to represent the brands, almost like a spokesperson model, almost like from a PR standpoint. But there's so much out there, and there's something that's probably going to launch next week that we're not even aware of, that 3 months from now, if we were doing a panel, we'd talk about trying that out. And I think, again, depending on your brand, I always loved having the opportunity, especially like right now as a consultant, I'm trying lots of different stuff. And that's the value that I'm trying to bring to clients, is testing the hell out of stuff and seeing what's working and what doesn't, and being willing to do that. And I'm not working obviously with anybody that has the requirements of like Wells Fargo. But I think most brands out there can have this ability to test, learn, figure things out, try it again, twist it, use different influencers, use different content, use video, all different kinds of things, and see what works. And then sadly, they'll change the algorithm and that probably won't work 3 months later, but that's why you got to keep evolving. That's what this is. And that's why this is an exciting field to be a part of.
Yeah. And to your point of what's the goal, sometimes even the question is, what's the content goal too, of, if you do need product-based images, because you are trying to fill your feeds, your own channels, your e-commerce, then TikTok's probably not the best place for you, right? Like, we could run a TikTok program, but that might not be as usable in your other channels as you think it is. So just understanding fully, to your point, the goals. And sometimes brands want to do everything, and that's okay, but like, let's define that. Let's figure out where we can bet. So we only have 4 minutes left. I think a good way to end is really just, let's go around the horn. Like, what are you either most excited about coming in this space, or what's a bold prediction you have for this space? LaBranda, do you want to take it from a content creator lens?
Sure. What's exciting is the conversation that we were having a few minutes ago is, the importance of the content creator is at an all-time high. So, these platforms are making it easier for A, you to create content, B, for you to show the value of the content that you're creating and how it's performing. So again, I think it's just going to continue the trend of influencer marketing and it being part of the media mix that's not going anywhere. Another thing that I'm excited about is, video. Video is becoming king. People want to really feel like they're connected with you in an even deeper way. And I love that video is going to become a bigger part of all of the platforms. I think TikTok really pushed that to the forefront. So yeah, those are the things that I'm excited about. And I'm also excited about what we don't know. What we do know is that there will be new platforms. And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see what those are and what they'll be and, how they'll weave into the industry. So yeah, those are probably the three things that I'm excited about.
Love it. Yep. Creators are learning new video skill sets. That's for sure. Jen, any big predictions or excitements?
I'm just excited that, we are going to have all these tools and measurement opportunities so that we can prove out the value and, understand how influencers are really driving towards the bottom line for companies and for products and services. And I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how brands, like Wells can actually take advantage of other platforms like TikTok, which we're starting to evaluate, and see what that next generation is going to be. Because I feel like, to LeBrandon's point, this is not going away. I think of it as kind of influence. It's kind of social media 2.0, right? It's influencer is now the next iteration of what we see in social as a way to communicate with the public. And doesn't seem like social is slowing down at any rate. So big things in the future, I think.
Yeah. All right, Drew, send us home.
The thing that I'm most excited about is a ton of stuff that's already been mentioned, but the one that it didn't come up is how recently the NCAA is going to allow athletes to make money off their name, image, and likeness. And I think that is going to open things up for virtually any brand out there. If you're smart enough, there is a college athlete in your town that might be a micro influencer that has lots of influence around a particular, maybe a niche kind of subject, but also could be somebody kind of quasi famous or actually very famous. And there's ways to work with them. And there's going to be all these people that for the first time can make money as an athlete and are going to love working with brands. And I think it is such a huge opportunity to work with them and be the first out, the first brands that are reaching out to like your local college teams. Is going to be really fun.
It's a great one. I had several conversations with universities last week about one, making sure these students are very educated about what they're getting into and how, and two, that it's very clear who the college is partnered with at the broader level and not disrupting those type of partnerships. So it's a hot topic for sure.
For sure.
All right, well, I want to thank you three. This was fantastic. You have incredible expertise here. Everyone who listened, this space is evolving. Like we have to spend time listening to each other and educating each other. So props to the people on the call listening, to the people who will tune in later, and to all of you. Bessie, anything you wanted to say before we head out?
No, just thanks to you guys. This was an awesome conversation, very informative. And thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Yeah, thanks to sfBIG for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.